I cheated after 17 years of marriage. Now, he won't talk to me unless the kids are in the room. Yeah, that's my life now. Sounds bad when you put it like that, right? I'm Courtney, 42, and I totally didn't see my life turning into this soap opera. Everyone always said Brandon and I were the perfect couple. 17 years of marriage, 2 beautiful daughters, and a house in a neighborhood where people actually want to live. We were that couple everyone looked at and thought, relationship goals. Brandon was always the guy who remembered anniversaries without phone reminders. He'd bring home my favorite takeout when I had a rough day at work. When Haley and Julia were little, he'd take them for daddy days so I could have time to myself. He was the husband who actually listened when I complained about drama at work, who rubbed my feet after I wore those killer heels I loved even though they murdered my arches. For our 10th anniversary, he planned this whole weekend getaway with all my favorite things. Between us, my friends were so jealous they could barely hide it. We had the matching SUVs in the driveway, the family photos on the walls, the inside jokes no one else understood. From the outside, we were perfect. The couple other couples would ask for advice. How do you two still look at each other like that after all these years? They ask at neighborhood cookouts, and I'd smile that knowing smile while Brandon's arm slipped around my waist. When other wives complained about their husbands leaving dirty socks on the floor or forgetting important dates, I nod sympathetically while secretly feeling superior. Brandon wasn't like other husbands. He was attentive, thoughtful, exactly what I'd always wanted. At least that's what I thought I wanted. But somewhere around year 15, I started feeling restless. The predictability that once felt secure started feeling stifling. I knew exactly what Brandon would say before he said it. I could anticipate his every move, his every thought. Date nights became just another routine. Different restaurant, same conversation. The sex was like a choreographed dance we performed 1,000 times. It wasn't bad, just known. Too known. I started noticing things that annoyed me, the way he cleared his throat before speaking. How he always checked the doors were locked 3 times before bed. His predictable reactions to everything. God, the predictability was suffocating me. I'd look at him across the dinner table talking about his day at work and think, is this really it? Is this all there is for the next 30 years? I never said anything though. What kind of ungrateful witch complains about a husband who's actually nice? Instead, I smiled and nodded and played my part as the happily married wife while feeling like I was slowly disappearing. I started spending more time at work, volunteering for projects that kept me busy and away from home. I told myself I was advancing my career, but really I was just avoiding the crushing sameness of my perfect life. The girls were teenagers by then. Haley was 16 and Julia 14, both lost in their own worlds of friends and activities and social media drama. They needed me less, and that left more time for me to dwell on my dissatisfaction. I'd look at younger women at work, single and carefree, and feel a twinge of something like envy. I started paying more attention to my appearance, updating my wardrobe, getting a new haircut that made me look younger. Brandon noticed, of course. He complimented me, seemed pleased. You look amazing, babe, he'd say, and I'd feel a moment of warmth before the restlessness crept back in. I wanted more reaction, more passion, more ... something. I started wondering if anyone else would look at me and feel that spark I was missing. And then Eric started at the office. Eric wasn't particularly handsome or charming at first glance. He wasn't even my type, really, but he looked at me like he actually saw me. Not just Courtney the wife, Courtney the mom, but Courtney the woman. When we were assigned to the same project, I found myself lingering after meetings, making excuses to collaborate. We started getting coffee together, then lunch, just colleagues, I told myself. Just friends, until we weren't just friends anymore. First time was after a late night at the office. Everyone else had gone home. We were reviewing some numbers that absolutely had to be perfect for the next day's presentation. He reached for the same file I did. Our hands touched, and suddenly, 17 years of marriage vaporized in the heat of something new, something forbidden. I told myself it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. But then it happened again, and again. I became someone I didn't recognize, sneaking around, making up excuses. To work late, deleting texts, creating elaborate lies. The affair with Eric lasted 6 months before Brandon found out. 6 months of living a double life, feeling more alive than I had in years, while simultaneously carrying the weight of betrayal. I justified it in 1,000 ways. Brandon had grown complacent, we'd lost our spark. I deserved to feel desired. Eric understood me in ways Brandon never had. The mental gymnastics I performed to make myself the victim instead of the villain were truly Olympic level. Looking back, I see the signs Eric wasn't actually interested in me as a person. He was younger, ambitious, probably saw sleeping with me as a way to advance, but in the moment the attention was intoxicating. Every compliment, every stolen kiss. In the supply closet, every secret hotel meeting felt like oxygen after years of slowly suffocating. I convinced myself I was falling in love with him. Maybe I even believed it. I got sloppy though. Started taking risks. One night I left my phone unlocked while showering, and Brandon saw a text from Eric that couldn't be misinterpreted. Still thinking about last night. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Not exactly subtle. When I got out of the shower, Brandon was sitting on the edge of the bed, my phone in his hand, looking like someone had just told him his entire family had died. I'll never forget his expression, this mixture of shock, pain, and worst of all, complete lack of surprise. Like some part of him had been waiting for me to hurt him. How long? He asked, his voice so flat it scared me more than if he'd been screaming. I tried to lie at first, claimed it was nothing, just flirty texts, a stupid crush, but Brandon just stared at me with those devastated eyes until the truth spilled out. Not all of it, I minimized where I could, made it sound more like an emotional affair than a physical one. Tried to paint myself as confused rather than calculating. But enough truth came out that night to shatter everything we'd built. I thought Brandon would yell, break things, storm out. That's what happens in movies, right? Instead, he just sat there nodding slightly as if I was confirming something he'd suspected all along. When I finished talking, he stood up, walked to the guest room, and closed the door. The quiet was worse than any screaming could have been. The next day, everything imploded at work too. Brandon had apparently spent the night looking through all my messages and emails. He'd forwarded the most damning ones to himself and then contacted our company's HR department. By noon, both Eric and I had been called in and fired for violating the company's policy on workplace relationships. Eric wouldn't even look at me as we cleared out our desks, suddenly strangers again. That night, I tried to talk to Brandon, cried, begged, promised it would never happen again. He just watched me perform my remorse with empty eyes before saying, "The girls can't know about this. We'll figure out what to do, but they can't know. Their mother is a cheater." The word cheater hit like a slap. I wanted to argue, to explain that it was more complicated than that our marriage had problems before Eric, but one look at Brandon's face and I knew there was no point. In his mind, there was before I cheated and after, with nothing in between that mattered. For weeks after, I tried everything to make things right. I got a new job quickly to show I was being responsible. I started therapy, hoping he'd see I was working on myself. I left little notes around the house like I used to do when we were first married. I tried initiating sex. God, that was a disaster. He literally turned his back on me and walked out of the room. The only time Brandon would engage with me at all was when Haley or Julia was in the room. Then, suddenly, he'd transform into a reasonable facsimile of his former self. Pleasant, conversational, even occasionally smiling. Our daughters had no idea anything was wrong, that's how good his act was. But the second they left, it was like a switch flipped and I became invisible again. About 2 months in, I got desperate. I'd always known Brandon had fantasies he'd never fully expressed. So one night after the girls were asleep, I suggested maybe we should try an open marriage. Just for him, I told him I'd understand if he wanted to see other women, that maybe it would help him get past what I'd done. I even offered to arrange it. God, I cringe remembering this, but I actually suggested I could find women for him, that maybe we could even try a threesome if that would make him happy. I thought I was being generous, offering him the same freedom I'd taken. Instead, he looked at me with pure disgust. "Is that really what you think this is about? That I'm jealous? That I just want permission to cheat too?" His voice was so cold. "I don't want an open marriage. I don't want other women. I wanted a wife who respected our vows. Then he delivered the ultimatum. If you ever mention anything like this again, open marriages, threesomes, any of it, I'll file for divorce immediately. No matter what it costs me." He wasn't bluffing. I could see it in his eyes. That's when I realized how badly I'd misjudged not just the situation, but who Brandon was as a person. I projected my own dissatisfaction onto him, assumed his needs were as shallow as mine had become. I tried bringing up couples therapy, and to my surprise, Brandon agreed. But the therapist's office was just another stage for our performance. Brandon would answer questions politely, go through the exercises, even complete the homework, but there was nothing behind it. No real desire to reconnect, just mechanical compliance. After sessions, he'd go right back to his silent treatment at home. Months passed like this. I lost weight, couldn't sleep, developed anxiety that made my chest feel tight constantly. Meanwhile, Brandon seemed to be doing fine. He got a promotion at work, started going to the gym regularly, took the girls on weekend trips to give me space. He'd say in front of them as if he was being considerate instead of avoiding me. I found myself frantically checking his phone when he wasn't looking, convinced he must be having an affair of his own. But there was nothing, no suspicious texts, no unexplained absences. It was almost disappointing having no ammunition to use against him, nothing to make us even. The worst part was watching him with Haley and Julia. He was still the same loving father he'd always been, helping with homework, attending school events, making pancakes on Sunday mornings. They adored him, completely unaware that when they weren't looking, their father couldn't stand to be in the same room as their mother. Why are you putting so much effort into pretending? I finally asked him one night after the girls went to bed. Why not just tell them the truth and leave if you hate me so much? Brandon looked at me for a long moment before answering, because, unlike you, I don't make choices based solely on what I want in the moment. Our daughters deserve an intact home until they're ready to leave it. After that, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. It's been almost 2 years since D-Day. As they call it on the infidelity support forums, I've started browsing in my loneliness. 2 years of living with a man who's physically present but emotionally gone. 2 years of maintaining our perfect couple facade for the neighbors, for our families, for our daughters. Haley's going to college next year. Julia will follow too. Years after that, the clock is ticking on whatever remains of my marriage, and I know it. I've tried everything. Apologies, seduction, guilt, anger, indifference. Nothing penetrates the wall Brandon has built between us. Sometimes I catch him looking at me when he thinks I won't notice. There's no hate in his eyes anymore, which is almost worse. Just nothing. Complete indifference, like I'm a stranger he's sharing space with temporarily. The husband who used to every new outfit, every haircut, now looks through me as if I'm not even there. Last week, I found paperwork in his desk drawer, financial planning documents, information about apartments in the city near his office, a consultation receipt from a divorce attorney dated just a few weeks after he discovered the affair. He's been planning his exit for almost 2 years, just waiting for the right moment. And I realized that while I've been desperately trying to save something that's already dead, Brandon has been patiently building his escape route. The most painful part is that I still love him. Or at least, I love the man he was, the life we had. I miss the comfort of his arms around me at night, the sound of his laugh, the way he used to look at me like I was his whole world. I threw it all away for what? A few months of excitement. With a man who didn't even bother to contact me after we were fired? Last night, Brandon actually spoke to me directly for the first time in weeks. I'm taking Julia shopping for a homecoming dress tomorrow. He said, his tone perfectly neutral, like he was talking to a casual acquaintance. She wants both of us there. Can you make it? Of course, I said, pathetically grateful for this crumb of normal interaction. I wouldn't miss it. He nodded and turned to leave the room. Brandon, I called after him, my voice catching. Will it ever get better? Will you ever forgive me? He paused in the doorway, his back still to me. For a moment, I thought he might not answer. I've already forgiving you, Courtney, he said finally, his voice soft but clear. I had to for my own peace, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean staying. He left without looking back, leaving me alone with the truth I've been avoiding. My marriage is over. It's been over since the moment I decided my vows were less important than my desires. In 3 months, Haley graduates. In 5, she leaves for college, and then the countdown truly begins. I see my future stretching out before me, divorce papers, selling our house, dividing our possessions, watching Brandon start a new life without me, while I'm left with nothing but regret and memories of what we once had. Sometimes I fantasize About going back in time, stopping myself from sending that first flirty text to Eric, from staying late at the office that night, from crossing lines that can never be uncrossed, but time only moves forward and actions have consequences. Mine certainly did. The night Brandon found those texts, he asked me a question I couldn't answer, was it worth it? 2 years later, as I lie alone in our king-size bed while he sleeps in the guest room, I finally have my answer. Nothing could be worth this hollowness, the slow-motion collapse of everything I once held dear. I made my choice, and now I'm living with it. Every day, I watch my husband pretend to still be my husband while planning his escape. Every night I go to sleep knowing I destroyed something precious that can never be rebuilt. And the worst part? I have no one to blame but myself, though God knows I've tried to distribute that blame elsewhere, to Brandon for being too predictable, to Eric for pursuing me, to my job for the stressful environment that pushed me toward bad decisions. The truth is simpler and harder to face. I was selfish. I wanted excitement without consequences. I thought I could have everything, the stability of my marriage and the thrill of an affair. Instead, I ended up with nothing but a countdown to the day Brandon finally walks away for good. 3 months until graduation, 5 months until Haley leaves for college, 24 months until Julia follows, and then I'll truly understand the cost of what I've done. When the facade finally falls away and I'm left standing in the ruins of the life I destroyed, I never thought it would actually happen. Not really. Even with all the signs, part of me believed Brandon would forgive me eventually, truly forgive me, that somehow we'd find our way back to each other. But last week, Haley graduated. We sat side by side in the audience, clapping and cheering as she walked across the stage in her cap and gown. Brandon's parents were there, my parents too, all of us playing our parts in this happy family parade. After the ceremony, as we posed for pictures, Brandon's arm around my shoulder felt like a stranger's. His smile never reached his eyes when he looked at me. Though it was genuine enough when he hugged Haley. We hosted a small party at the house, our last event as a complete family unit. Though no one else knew that night after everyone left and the girls went to bed, Brandon handed me an envelope. Inside were divorce papers already filled out, just waiting for my signature. I've been more than fair with the financial arrangements, he said, his voice matter of fact, like we were discussing a business transaction. You can keep the house until Julia graduates if you want, or we can sell it and split the proceeds. I've already found an apartment downtown. I stared at him, the reality finally sinking in. You're really doing this? After all this time, you're still leaving? I told you I would, he replied, no anger in his voice, just certainty. I stayed for the girls. Haley's an adult now, Julia will understand. You don't have to do this, I whispered, tears welling up. We can still work it out. People recover from affairs all the time. Brandon looked at me with something almost like pity. This isn't about the affair anymore, Courtney. It's about the fact that I don't trust you. I don't even know you. The woman I married wouldn't have done what you did, and she certainly wouldn't have suggested I sleep with other women to make things even. This marriage has been over for 2 years. I've just been waiting for the right time to make it official. He moved out the next day while Julia was at a friend's house. Took only what he needed for his new apartment, said we could figure out the rest later. When Julia came home and found out, she was devastated, blamed me immediately, somehow knowing instinctively that whatever had happened was my fault. Brandon never told her about the affair, kept his promise on that. But she's 16, not stupid. She's barely spoken to me since. Within weeks, the news of our separation spread through our social circle. I tried to control the narrative, suggesting we'd just grown apart, but then came the final blow. Brandon started dating. Not casually, not playing the field like I expected, but seriously dating one woman. Someone from his office, I later found out, Rebecca. Even her name sounds wholesome and trustworthy. The first time I saw them together was at a restaurant downtown. I was having lunch with a friend when they walked in. Hand in hand, Brandon looked happy. Genuinely happy. In a way I hadn't seen in years. My friend noticed them too, then glanced at me with pity. Did you know? She asked. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. After that, the story began to shift. People stopped inviting me to gatherings where Brandon would be present. Friends we'd had for years slowly drifted toward him. Even my own parents, who'd initially been supportive, Started making comments about second chances and how Brandon seems to be doing well. After meeting Rebecca at Julia's tennis match. 8 months after moving out, Brandon proposed to Rebecca. Julia told me, her voice a mix of excitement and accusation. Dad's getting married again? Rebecca's really nice. She actually listens when I talk. The divorce was finalized last month, Brandon and Rebecca are getting married in the spring. Julia has asked to live with them after the wedding. Haley calls from college but visits her father's apartment when she's home, only stopping by the house out of obligation. The beautiful home that was once filled with love now feels like an empty museum of a life that no longer exists. I finally got the answers to questions I was too afraid to ask before. Brandon hadn't been secretly planning his exit from the beginning. He genuinely tried to forgive me. It was my behavior afterward that killed any chance of reconciliation. The manipulation, the suggestions of an open marriage, the refusal to take full responsibility. As he put it in our last real conversation, you weren't sorry you cheated, you were sorry you got caught. He was right. I wasn't truly remorseful, not at first. I was just desperate to avoid consequences, to keep my comfortable life intact. By the time I understood what I'd really lost, it was far too late. I ran into Eric last week, the first time since we were both fired. He's married now too, to someone younger. Barely acknowledged me beyond a nod. The passionate affair that I destroyed my family for wasn't even memorable enough for him to feel awkward seeing me again, just another conquest in his rearview mirror. So here I am, alone in a house too big for one person, with photos I can't bear to look at but can't bring myself to take down. The divorce settlement was generous. Brandon always was a better person than me, but money doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't call to check if you're okay, doesn't remember your favorite ice cream, doesn't hold your hand through good news and bad. I thought the worst consequence of my affair would be Brandon's anger. I was wrong. His indifference was worse than his anger. And now this new reality, watching him build a happy life with someone else while mine crumbles. This is the true punishment. Not because he intended it that way, but because it's the natural result of the choices I made. Sometimes on my darkest nights, I take out my phone and hover over Brandon's number, composing texts I never send. What would I even say? That I'm sorry? He's heard that 1,000 times. That I miss him. That would only burden him with guilt he doesn't deserve. That I still love him? That stopped being relevant the moment I betrayed him. So instead, I live. With my regrets, I smile through Julia's increasingly rare visits. I send Haley care packages at college. I go to work, come home, eat dinner alone, and wonder how I could have been so blind, so selfish, so sure that the grass was greener somewhere else when I already had everything that mattered. Brandon asked me once if it was worth it. The answer haunts me every single day. Nothing was worth this, nothing ever could be.